In a previous video, I demonstrated how we could build an accessible biography card using HTML and CSS. In this video, I'm going to show how we can turn that card into a WordPress block that can be installed using a standalone plugin or theme. Oh, and did I mention that we're going to do all of this without writing a single line of code? Actually, we aren't going to create just one block in this video. Using this card, I'm going to create 3 different blocks that show you various ways that you might want to distribute this depending on your needs. In the first block, we're going to take that card as designed and make a static block that you insert as is. In the second block, we're going to add some properties so your clients can add or modify their own content. In the last block, and this is the method I would personally use, we'll use Pinegrow to create a custom post type and taxonomy for the biographies. Then we'll add some custom fields using Meta Box, and we'll take all that data to display a dynamic grid of biographies that automatically pulls the information. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. So to refresh your memory, this is the card we built in the last project. You can download this project file from GitHub in the resources below. Right now, it's just a plain index.html file. We can open it up in a browser without needing anything special. But we want to turn this into a WordPress block, right? So to get started, we're going to use the WordPress module inside of Pinegrow. And to do that, we come over to the WordPress Theme Builder tab, and we click on Activate WordPress. This brings up the settings panel. And here we can choose between theme and plugin. And I'm going to choose plugin. We're going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this biography card. Now we're going to give it a plugin slug and a plugin folder. Now what this plugin folder does is it's going to write out all our plugin files someplace. And we want to be able to pick that up and see it in pretty much real time. There's a few different ways that you can do this. If you really were masochistic, you could probably take those files and FTP them back and forth from your server. But the way that most people do it right now, especially with the desktop version of Pinegrow, is we will export it to a local file system that's running something like LocalWP or Laragon. So I'm going to create a site using LocalWP. And we'll just do create new site. I'm going to call this PG Bio Card. We'll leave all the settings the same. Okay, and there we have it. Now we're inside of a fresh, clean WordPress build. I'm just going to change one thing here. I'm going to change this to using HTTPS because I don't like seeing that not secure thing down there. Absolutely no good reason. Now we're in. And you can see we have nothing here. We're just running 2022, no plugins, no nothing. But what we need to do is we need to find the folder that we're going to drop these plugin files in. So we'll come back to LocalWP, go to site folder, and I'm going to navigate to my WP content, plugins. So here inside plugins, I'm going to make this folder PG_biocard. The reason we have to make it here inside of Windows Explorer or Finder is because of the programming language that is used for Pinegrow won't let them create folders from inside these dialog boxes. But now we've got the plugin folder created, and I just need to grab the path of it and pop it in here. There we go. And then for site URL, I'm just going to grab this and drop it in there. I'll hit Save Settings. And then I'm going to do WordPress Export Theme. Even though we're doing a plugin, the menu item's still the same, Export Theme. And we'd use the same one whether we're doing a theme or a plugin. So now if we come back here to the directory that we just created, you can see inside there we've got the pgbiocard.php. We've got the inc folder, and that's got a custom.php as well as a helper PHP file. And this is basically what it needs in order to create the plugin for us. So if we come back here and refresh, you can now see that we have a biography card plugin. Now that we're back here inside of Pinegrow, we take a look at the index.html file. And if we click on the root, this is where we have the page settings. Now, we're not actually doing a theme, we're creating a plugin. So we want to say, don't export this page. And we'll come back here to WordPress and do export the theme. From now on, I'm going to use Control M for this, just as a shortcut. So I'm going to save, I'll do Control M, that's going to export the plugin. And if we come back to WordPress, refresh, we can activate that plugin, and there we go. Right now, this plugin doesn't do anything. And you'll see it still says, it's made by John Smith and version 100. We'll fix all that later. But the good news is we've got a plugin that Pinegrow is exporting, and our WordPress installation is picking that up. So let's do something really simple. I said that we're going to create 3 different blocks. So we've got our card grid, and I'm just going to copy this twice. I'll hit the number 2, and hit the copy button. And now we have 3 copies of it. This first one, I'm going to come here and I'm going to name this dumb block. Second one, I'll call smart block. And the third one, I'll call dynamic block. So if you remember in this first one, the dumb block, this is going to do nothing. This is just going to take things as we have right here, and it's going to create a block that we can import into WordPress. So all I'm going to do is take this and come over to our WordPress actions, click on block, and I'm going to call this PG-dumb block. And I'll call this PG dumb block. I can give it an icon if I want. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. So we'll browse icons and we'll go to remix icons, and let's find something that's a little bit block-like. All right, cool. I'll just use this layout grid block right here. I'll click on it. We'll say copy SVG. That copies it to the clipboard. I come back into Pinegrow and I can paste that SVG code right here into the icons. Now we want to create a category for this. So I could put it in any of the predefined WordPress categories, or I can create a custom category. So that's what I'll do here. I'll say custom, and I want to call this category ID PG blocks. And I have to register the category since this is the first time that we're using it. So it's a register category, and we're going to call it Pinegrow blocks. If I wanted to give the category an icon, I could do that here, but I hardly ever do that. So I'll just leave it be. We'll hit save. We're going to export the plugin. And now when we come back to WordPress, we can go to one of our pages. I'll take our sample page, get out of there. We will delete all this. And we'll add our block. Go all the way down at the bottom. You can see that we have the Pinegrow blocks category, and we have the PG dumb block. So we add that in, and there you have it. We've got the block in there. Now, there's a lot going on here, and it does not look anything like what we want. So let's come back into Pinegrow, and we're going to fix some of this. Now let's take a look at some of the things that we need to fix. First of all, we need to fix the style because none of the styles that we applied are taking effect here. The other thing we need is we're going to need those images, and we don't have any of them here either. So let's do what we need to do. Back in Pinegrow, I'm going to come over to our project folder, and you can see we've got the folders over here in the files, and then on the right-hand side, we've got these X's and check marks. So what we need to do is we need to take our images folder, and I'm going to right-click on that and say copy to theme, yes. And now we have the 3 images that we're going to use, and I'm going to just take each of these, and we're going to say copy to WordPress, or copy to theme. There we go. So now when I export, we'll take a look. And you'll see we now have the blocks, and this is what has the code for the block. We've got the INC, and that's some of the stuff that Pinegrow puts in place, this custom.php. We'll talk about that in a bit. And we now have the images folder with the images inside of it that it's going to copy in as part of the plugin. The other thing we need is this CSS. So we're going to right-click on it, copy to theme, yes. And the only one that I'm going to use is this style.css. So we're going to right-click on that and say yes. But that still doesn't do anything to use this style. So we'll save this, we'll export it, and we'll come back just to double check everything so you can see what's happening. Our CSS folder's there, our style.css has been copied over, we're good to go. Now when we refresh this, we have our images, but our styling is still all messed up. So to fix that, we need to actually tell this block that we're going to use that style.css file. So we come over here to block, and under more options, we've got 2 different places for style. We've got the style, and this is where we pick the style sheet that's going to be used for the front end of the website. And then we have editor style. So in case we need a different style sheet for the editor, we would choose that here. And this is really just a factor of WordPress. They use different styles for the front end and for the editor. So we have the option inside Pinegrow to choose one for each one. If we needed JavaScripts to include, we could also do that here as well. So I'm going to select my style sheet, and we'll save, we'll export. And when we refresh the page, now you can see that it's been applied. Now remember that we're using the 2022 theme inside of WordPress, so the content area is really narrow in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this page, and I'm going to come here to template, and we're going to say new template. And this is just a WordPress thing that we're doing here. We're just modifying the block theme to give it a wider page width. So I'll come over here to our list view, our group, and content area. I'm going to make that 1280 pixels, and for wide, I'm going to make this 100%. Let's come back here, and we're going to make this bigger and expand it, and we're going to find our post content. And we do not want to inherit the default layout. I just want to make that expand to what we have there. So we'll do update now, save, get out of there, and let's take a look on the front end. There we go. Now this is better. So now we have a DOM block that shows exactly what we needed to inside of WordPress. Again, though, if somebody came in and wanted to edit this block, they can't do anything. So let's look at our block properties. We don't have any. No one can come in and change links. We can't change any text. We can't change pictures, none of that stuff. But we have a block. This is also probably a good opportunity to come back inside of Pinegrow, and I'm going to show you one other thing that you probably want to modify. If you're creating a plugin, you will find the plugin name.php, or if you're creating a theme, you'll have a style.css here in the root of your project. Just right click on that and say open in code editor. And here we want to change the header. And what this does is this is what adds the information inside of WordPress. So when we look at our plugins, this is what's going to add the description and the version and the name and all of that good stuff. So we'll just change that right here. Now I could go through and add a bunch of information in here, but I'm not really going to. I'm just going to do this as a sample. Save, export. Now we'll come back to WordPress, refresh, and we can see the new description that I put in is version 101 by Adam Lowe. Visit plugin site, and that takes us to example.com. All right, so that's one plugin down. Now for this to be actually useful, we're going to want to give people the ability to change all the information on these cards. So here's how we're going to do that. We'll start off by hiding the blocks that we don't need. So I'm just going to come back over here to my tree view, and I'm going to collapse that, and I'm going to use the eye icon to hide that inside Pinegrow. And I'll do the same thing for the dynamic block. We'll just hide that so that we're only seeing the one that we're working on. We're still going to see it in the tree view, but you'll see that it's grayed out, and hopefully that'll keep me from getting too confused. The other thing that we could do is we could do Control F, and that's going to do focus on, so that we're only seeing the part of the tree that we're working on. This is a really nice feature, and I probably should use it more than I do. I usually just fumble around the tree view myself. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now that we have those hidden, let's go ahead and start work. We're going to create the block. So I'm going to do add block smart action. We're going to call this pg-smart block. I'm not going to bother making an icon for this. I already showed you how to do it. For category, we're going to select custom. And since we've already created the category, we just drop down and say PG blocks, and that's going to add it to the same category that we already created. For style, I'll go ahead and select that same style sheet. There we go, already selected. And now we're good to start work. I'm going to save this. We're going to export it. And over inside of Pinegrow, we'll come back to our sample page. We can edit that page, and I'm going to take our DOM block and remove it. And now we're going to add our smart block in. And oddly enough, that smart block is acting just like the DOM block because we haven't done anything with it yet. So now we've got the DOM block and we've got the smart block that are exactly the same. And we're going to start adding some actions to this. So we'll come back inside of Pinegrow. And the way I want to do it is I think I'm actually going to create two different blocks for this. One block for the wrapper that holds the grid. And the reason I'm going to do that is because WordPress doesn't have a very good grid in it at all. We could do columns and stick each of these cards in a column, but I really want something that's going to use our CSS grid. So we're going to have that one block. Our outer block is going to be this PG Smart block, and that's what we have right here that we're looking at. But then I'm going to take one of these cards and I'm going to turn it into an inner block. So let's go ahead and start collapsing some things here just so that we can see what's going on. I've got a grid item, a second grid item, and a third grid item. And now I want to select our card grid wrapper, and I'm going to add a block inner content. So what this is going to do is, if you've ever seen a block where you can add another block inside of it, that's what this is letting me do. So here's our outer block, and then inside that outer block, I'm going to have this wrapper that allows me to add more blocks in there. So I have this block inner content, and just to show you what's going on, I'm going to save and export. And when we refresh, you're going to see that we have to attempt block recovery because we just made a huge change to that block. We're going to recover that block. And now you see that there's nothing in there. And that's because we haven't actually created our inner blocks yet. So let's do that next. Now we're just going to work on this one block item, and I'm going to call this PG Smart Inner. I'm going to call it PG Smart Inner Block. Give it our custom category and select that. Now there's a couple things that I'm going to do that are going to seem a little bit odd. So I'm going to copy this name, PG Smart Inner. And I'm going to select our block inner content that we just added. And under Allow Block Types, I'm going to paste in that PG Smart Inner. And that's going to say that the only type of block that we can add to that inner content is this type of block that we just created. The other thing that I want to do is make it so that we only see this block when we're using the parent block. I don't want to be able to select this directly from the WordPress block editor. So I'll come back here to the main block, and that's PG-Smart Block. And we're going to paste that in here under More Options. I'm going to say my parent is PG Smart Block. Save. Export, come back to WordPress, refresh, and attempt block recovery. All right, there we go. Now you can see we've got our PG Smart Block with 3 PG Smart inner blocks. And if I want to, I can add more. Now it's not giving me the dialog of which type of block to add because there's only the one that we can create. I can click on this as many times as I want and just keep adding more and more bios. We're going to hit update and view page. And there we have it. And if you remember, we used a min-max with the CSS grid that said that it has to be a minimum of, I think it was 15 rems and a maximum of 1 full width row. So that's what we're seeing here is we're seeing that it can fit 4 of these in our row, and we've got 2 rows. This still doesn't address the problem though of needing to be able to edit the inner content. So that's what we'll do now. We'll come back to Pinegrow and we're going to work on this block that has our content. And the first thing that we want to do is to change her name. So I'm going to select the name and I'm going to say block attributes. I'm going to call this inner_name. And I'm going to say name is going to be the title and we're going to use that as the contents. So I'm just going to save this and export it and show you what this does before we start adding anything more. We'll edit the page, we'll refresh. And now when I select this block, you'll see under block properties, we have name and I can edit that directly right there. Or well, we have this as a link, so we can't click directly in there. But if this whole card wasn't a link, we would be able to just click right in there and edit the text directly. But because we have that link wrapper around it, anytime we click on the card, it's going to want to take us to another link, and we're not going to mess around with that. So yeah, so now we're going to be able to create these properties for the block that lets us change all sorts of stuff. We'll be able to change the job title. We'll be able to change her picture. We're going to create another inner content for this so that we can just add paragraph text or do whatever we want. And then we'll create some properties for our social links. All right, so adding each of these attributes is pretty much as easy as what I just did there. So now that we've got the name in, we're going to do the name link wrapper. And I'm going to do a block attribute for this. We're going to call that inner link, biography link. And it sees that it's already an anchor and it's going to use that as the link. For other types of anchors, we could add another attribute in there that changes the content, which would be the link text. But we don't need to do that for this one. We've got our span for the job title. For biography, I'm going to add this as a block inner content, and I'm going to leave this allow block types to all. For photo, I'll add an attribute. And again, it's going to be able to use that as the image. Image size, I want it to be the large image. Use image alt. I'm going to leave this as auto right now, and then it's going to behave the way that WordPress does by default, and that lets us take the alt text from the media library and use it for the alt text of the image. If I wanted to, I could also create another block attribute that lets me set that image alt manually. And if we expand this, we can also see that, if it's empty, we can use the default value. We can remove the element completely. There's lots of stuff in here that we could do, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. All right, so we have our image defined. And now we're going to come down to the footer and let's do a few things here. What I'd love to be able to do is create yet another block that would go in here and would be each one of our social icons. Now the problem is, and this is the limitation of WordPress more than anything, is that you can only have one inner content block per block. So we can't have the inner content here for the biography as well as another inner content for the footer. So we've got some trade-offs that we need to think about there. So for this, we're just going to create those properties for Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn manually. Then we'll set some conditions around them. So we'll start off with Facebook and we will leave the icon alone. And I'm going to add a link for that Facebook link. Now we want to add one for the Facebook accessibility text. And we also want to change the hover text for it. So we're going to click on the anchor again, and that means that we need to change the title here. So we'll come back and we'll create another attribute. And you can see that it doesn't know what we want to do. So we're going to use this as an attribute of title. So let's save this and export, and we'll refresh. And now it's going to want to attempt block recovery on all of these. As a matter of fact, I'm going to delete all but the first one. And now you can see we've got a lot of properties for this block that we can start playing with. Now we've got the default image there, and this is not pulling from the media library. It's actually pulling from the plugin folder. So I want to replace this image with one that's going to be grabbed from the media library, and that'll let us use media queries for responsive sizes. So we're going to select files, and I'm going to upload those images, and I will select Jane Dewey. I'll add in my alt text, and there we go. For biography link, I'm just going to click on that, and we'll send that over to Hello World and put in her name, senior partner, or grab that as the default. And we've got our Facebook link of facebook.com, our default text of follow Jane Dewey on Facebook, our default accessibility text of follow Jane Dewey on Facebook. And just so we can see what's happening, I'm going to change this to just say follow Jane Dewey hover text. And I'm going to take this block and just copy it twice, just for visibility's sake. And we can see inside of here, we have our block inner content section. So I'll grab the text from Pinegrow and we'll just pop that in there. And there we have it. So now let's take a look at this. We're going to do inspect and let's find our photo wrapper. We can see that it's using media queries. We can see that it's pulled the alt text from the media library, Jane Dewey headshot. We've got the name, senior partner, block inner content. When I hover over this thing, it's pointing to the Hello World blog post. And then down here for our text, our hover text is saying follow Jane Dewey hover text, and the link is going to facebook.com. Now we just handled the one social icon, and we haven't added any type of conditions to these. So let's do that next. And the condition that I want to add is I only want to show this icon if there is something in the link. So I'll come over here to WordPress and we'll come back to the link. And under attribute options, we're going to say if empty, if that link is empty, we're going to say remove the element. So let's save this, export. We will attempt block recovery. And now you can see that it's not there. And that's because we don't have the Facebook link already set. It's not using the default link. If we add this in, you can see that it added our link. Now let's save and view. And you can see because we have the link in there, it's showing, but because we have not added it to these other two cards, we don't see it. So now I'll take those same things and I'll just repeat them for our Twitter link and our LinkedIn link. Okay, now with all those properties added, we can come back in here, edit our page, do our block recovery, and there we have it. We've got our biography link set, name, job title, Facebook link, Facebook hover text, Facebook accessibility text, Twitter link. And you can see as soon as I add that in, it shows up our Twitter icon. And there we go. Now we have our card. All of our fields are fully editable, and we can duplicate that and change the text to whatever we want. So let's just do it. And before we do Elizabeth Howe, I want to show you one other thing. So let's view this page just so you can see Jane and Jimmy. And we're going to go back to Pinegrow because this is kind of cool. So we have our block attribute for name set over here, right? And this attribute ID of inner underscore name, this is actually getting saved as a variable that we can reuse if we want to. So instead of each time typing in Jane's name for each one of these things twice, so we need to change it for the hover text as well as the accessibility text for each one of these social icons, we're just going to use this one variable and insert it each time. And let's go ahead and do that. So over here, we've got our title. And under attribute options, we're going to change this to expression. And the expression we're going to use is follow inner name on Facebook. We'll change Twitter to be the same way. And then we'll do a similar thing for our accessibility text. And the other thing I forgot to do here is for each one of these expressions, instead of saying control type, auto, I'm going to change that to none, use with expression. So now instead of showing a text box for this hover text, it's just going to use this as an expression. So we'll do that for each of these as well. Now we'll create the block for Elizabeth Howe, and we'll select her photo, junior partner, Facebook link, Twitter link, and LinkedIn link. All right, there we go. Now we're hovering over these. There we go. We've got the hover text that looks right. Follow Jane Dewey on Twitter. Follow Jane Dewey on LinkedIn. Cheatham on LinkedIn. Cheatham on Twitter. Twitter. Follow him on LinkedIn. Follow Elizabeth Howe on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So now it's pulling all of that dynamically based on the variable set for that person's name. Let's just make sure that our accessibility text also does the same. And there it is. We see in our spans, it automatically populated the text for the span. All right, so that's it. So now we've created our smart block. And I know that was a lot of steps, and part of that is because we did this in a very systematic way. I wanted to show you what each of those things did rather than just kind of blast through and put all the properties in place. But when you look at it, it's actually pretty simple. We just took the one block and we added properties for all the things that we want to modify. So we added a property to modify the name, the job title, the headshot, link. This is just a inner block. And then properties for each of our social icons. We also added conditions so that if we don't have links for any of these social icons, it'll just hide the thing. And we used expressions so that we don't have to type in the text for the hover text or the accessibility text each time. So that's all pretty cool, right? Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this same concept and we're going to use it in a repeater so that we're pulling all of this from a custom post type instead of entering it individually on each card. The benefit of doing it that way is that we can use that information that's in the custom post type in all sorts of places over the website, whereas information that's stored in a block can't be accessed quite as easily. So now to create this third type of block where it's going to pull the data dynamically, we're going to need to do a little bit of setup. Let's take the smart block that we just created, and we're going to hide it, and we're going to unhide our dynamic block, and we're going to minimize some of this or collapse some of these things just so that we can have a little bit of a cleaner space to work in. And just like the other ones, we're going to start off by creating the block object. We'll just do block smart action. The title is PG dynamic block. Again, not going to mess with the icon. I could if I wanted to, but I'm not. And we're going to do our custom category, PG blocks, and we'll save, export. And I just want to make sure that that block is coming through okay. So we're going to click on there, and there we go. So we've got the PG dynamic block. Oh, and you know what I forgot to do is I forgot to load the style sheet. But because we're already loading the style sheet in the block before, it's not going to make any difference. I'm going to remove those other blocks. And you can see as soon as I remove the other block that had the style sheet referenced, we lose all of our styles. So let's go back into Pinegrow just to make sure that I am showing the style sheet correctly. There we go. Save and export. And now we're loading it correctly. And again, we're starting off from scratch, so it is a dumb block. It doesn't have any properties, not doing anything fun. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to register the custom post type. I could use a WordPress plugin like CPT UI, or right here inside of Pinegrow, we have the ability to do a similar thing. So we're going to use the WordPress action of register post type. This isn't going to give us all the same properties or as many properties as something else would, but it's going to give us pretty much exactly what we need for our uses. So if I wanted to, I could create a div that would just hold our custom post type and our custom taxonomy, but I'm going to take one of the divs that we already have and I'm just going to attach it to there. So first we're going to register that custom post type, and I'm going to call this bio-post type, and we're going to call this post type employee, and the singular name is just going to be employee. We're going to make it public, and now I want to add some things that it's going to support. So I want to add title because that's where we're going to put the name. We want to add a editor field so that we can add some content in there. Generally speaking, I want to add the author to most things. We'll add thumbnail because that's where we're going to hold the person's bio photo. We'll add excerpt. We're going to use the excerpt for this short excerpt here in the grid. And we're going to do page attributes so that we can order the bios inside the grid. We are going to say has archive, and we are going to enable the REST API. And what this does is it makes it a Gutenberg style editor as opposed to classic style editor. We do want to show the UI, and we do want to show it in the menu so that we can do, new employee. For the menu icon, I have to use WordPress dash icons for it, and I'm going to use the dash icon groups for that. You'll see what it looks like in a minute. Menu position, I'm going to make this the default of 20, and I'm not going to mess around with taxonomies here because we're going to change that in another place. So let's save this. And I also want to point out that here inside of most of these actions, at the very top, you'll probably find a little help button. So clicking on that will generally take you to the WordPress page with the help text that tells you what each of those things mean and how to use them. Okay, but we're going to save this. And you can see it said quick export is done, but please export the whole project. So let's do that. Let's just do WordPress, export the theme. We'll close our help. And now we're going to attempt our block recovery. And there we go. So you can see we have our blocks still there, and this is still our dumb block. However, when we come back to the dashboard, we now have a custom post type of employees. And here we can add Jane, Jimmy, and Elizabeth. So let's put her name in. We'll do an excerpt for her, set her picture as the featured image. But we don't have our custom fields yet for all of her social links. And we also have not set up the taxonomy for job descriptions. So let's just publish this, and we'll take care of that now. All right, so we have our post type registered. Now we're going to register a taxonomy. We'll register that as bio job title. And for post types, we're going to apply this only to our bio post type. We'll call it job title, job titles. Singular name is job title. And yes, it's public, so that we can do something with it and not just access it programmatically. And I want to make this hierarchical. And what this is going to do is it's going to let us select it from a predefined list as opposed to having to type it in. So we're going to save. And again, quick export was done. And this is just because we added something big. And we're going to come back, and when I refresh the page, we can see that we now have job titles. So I'm going to add in job titles of senior partner, partner, and junior partner. I'll come back to our friend Jane, and under job titles, she is now my senior partner. So now we have everything we need except for the custom fields that we're going to use for the social icons. Now, unfortunately, Pinegrow does not come with anything that lets us create custom fields. You can't even do that using code. You really need a plugin like ACF or Meta Box. So we're going to use Meta Box here. We'll just find that inside the WordPress repository, install it, activate it. It brings you to this screen. Meta Box does not have a UI by default. As a matter of fact, you're not even really going to see it here in the menu once it's been installed. And that's part of the reason why I like it. I also love it because once you have the Pro version, you can do all sorts of things with it. It's way more powerful than ACF is, in my opinion, but to each their own. What we can do, though, is instead of having to write the code to create all those custom fields, we're going to go to their online generator. And this pops open a website that lets us use their builder here online to generate the code that we're just going to drop right inside of Pinegrow. So I want a field for Facebook URL, Twitter URL, and LinkedIn URL. Now this is all pretty basic. I could use groups. I could use clonable stuff if I wanted to. If we wanted to make this so that we didn't have to have 3 separate fields, all sorts of things that we could do here. But I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible since we're already relatively complex. So we just have these 3 fields. I'm going to say generate code. And this is the code that we're going to drop right into Pinegrow. I do need to set a few more properties on this before it becomes really useful though. So let's come back up here to settings, and our field group title is going to be social media links, field group ID, social links. Now post type, I want to change this from post to page. For position, I want to move that to the sidebar, and I want to change my priority from high to low. We'll leave the text domain and the field ID prefix alone and say generate code. Now you see the thing that it did over here is when we change this from post to page, inside the code here, we've got post types and it says page. So now all I need to do is copy this code. I'm going to bring it over here to Pinegrow. Inside our INC folder, we have our custom.php that we're going to open in the code editor. I'm going to just drop that right in there. The only thing we're going to change is that one thing that says post type page, because I don't want this to apply to all of our pages. I want it to only apply to our bio-post type. So we'll save that. We're going to go WordPress, export the theme. And when we refresh, we'll come back into our employees. Let's take a look at Jane. And now we have social media links. So we'll put in a link for Facebook, one for Twitter, and one for LinkedIn. Okay. Now, if I go to try to view this post, since what we did is we created a post, we're going to click on that, and you're going to see that we get a 404. And this is pretty typical when you have new custom post types, is you'll need to come in and go to your permalinks and just flush them. And all you do to flush it is make sure that your settings are set. Don't change anything. Just hit save changes. And now we can view Jane's page. We don't have a template for this page, so it's not going to look like much of anything. But for our purposes, we don't really care what her bio page looks like. What we care about is the fact that she has one and that we can pull the data from it. So now let's go ahead and we're going to use our menu and we're going to create employees for Jimmy and Elizabeth. So Jimmy Cheatham. All right, so this all seems like it was a lot of setup work just for 3 employees. And because there's only 3 employees, it is a lot of setup work. But if you had a company where you had hundreds of employees and they needed to be referenced in multiple places, more than just inside these bio cards, then it definitely becomes advantageous to do it this way. So now we've got a bio page for each of these people. We can reference their information inside of the cards. We can reference it inside of all kinds of other stuff just by using this custom post type and those custom fields that are associated with them. So now that we have all of this done, we're going to modify our block so that it's pulling all this information for us. We'll come back into Pinegrow and we'll close up our PHP. That is the closest we're going to come to code today. We already have our block defined, but it's just not doing anything right now. Here on the section, we're registering the custom post type and we're registering the taxonomy. Now here on the grid card wrapper, this is where we're going to do a query. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, query that employee post type and show me a card for each one of the items inside of that custom post type. What we're going to do is we'll come over here and we're going to use the show posts smart action. Now for loop type, we do not want to choose the main loop. We want to create a custom query. And for post type, we're going to select our bio_post type. Let's give this query a name. We'll call this bio query. Posts to load. We want to load all of them. So we could select just some of them. We could select them if they only have a featured image. We could do all sorts of crazy stuff there. Order by, I'm going to change this to menu order up. We have not set menu order yet, but we will in a bit. Post tags, if we wanted to narrow it down by post tag, we could. Same thing with categories, we could do that as well. Post per page, we're not going to paginate this. I'm going to leave this blank because I just want to show all of them. If we had a lot of them to load, then yes, we would definitely want to add some pagination, but we're not going to do that for right now. I could say to ignore sticky posts, only show sticky posts or no sticky posts. We'll leave that be for now. And we'll just keep coming on down to the rest of the options to run through these. If I wanted to add a class for the first item, I could do that. If I wanted to show only a range of items, so that means show as opposed to load. So this means that we're going to query all of them, and show means that we're going to display them. So I want to show all of them, and I want to query all of them. So we're going to leave this alone. We'll leave set the ID attribute alone, and we'll leave this show no post text. And this is going to be that if it can't find anything in the query, it's going to say no posts found. We could say no here, and it would show nothing, but we'll leave this to yes. So now for items container, we're going to select the current element, which is our unordered list element. And for repeated loop items, we're going to select the first grid item, that LI. Under certain circumstances, you might want to select a last repeated element, but we're not going to do that for right now. And also, if we had a div or something that had stylized text or anything else that we wanted to show, if no posts were found, we could select that here. But again, we're going to leave it blank. So without changing anything else, I'm going to save this and export it because I want you to see what's going to happen. And then I'm going to explain to you why it's happening the way that it is. So back inside WordPress, we'll come back to all pages, come back to our sample page. We'll recover our block. And here we go. You see we have 3 Jane Deweys. Now we have a Jimmy Cheatham and an Elizabeth Howe. Let's dissect this for a minute. So what we have here is this first item is getting repeated once for each of our employees that are in the custom post type. So we have one for Jane, one for Jimmy, and one for Elizabeth Howe. But inside this grid item, we're not changing any of the information dynamically yet. So it's just repeating this 3 times. Then after that, it's showing this other grid item for Jimmy, and lastly, this one for Elizabeth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by hiding these last 2. We're going to still see them inside the builder here, but I don't want to show them in the block. So I'll come over to all WordPress actions, and I'm going to use this don't export smart action. Save that, export, and there we have it. So now we're just showing 3, 1 for each of our 3 items inside the custom post type. And now we just need to go through and set the properties for each of those. So let's export our card. And we'll start with name. And for name, we're going to use the post title. For the link, we're going to use the post link. For the job title, we're going to do post tags and categories. And I want to show the taxonomy bio job title. And we're going to say use this element as a template. So it's going to use all the styling that we have for this element as the template to show each one if we have more than one. But I only want to show 1. So range of items to show, I'll just say 0 because 0 is where we start counting. And now for bio, I'm going to come down and I will say post excerpt. For image, post featured image. And we're going to save these links for just 1 minute after I save and export and show you what this looks like. And when we refresh, you can see it's pulling all that information dynamically from our custom post type. It's pulling the images, it's pulling the names, it's using the custom taxonomy, excerpts. And then the last thing we want to do is grab our links. It's also pulling the link for the card. So if I click on one of these, it's going to take me to Jane. If I click on that, Jimmy, and click on that, Elizabeth. So now to create a new card, all I have to do is create another employee record. But now we're going to come in and we're going to tell it to pull all the information for our social media links. And now that I'm looking at it, let's just modify this featured image thing here. So size, I want to do full size and responsive. This we can say guess responsive sizes, and it's going to go through and guess what the media query should be. All right, so now we're going to look at our links. We want to set the link to whatever we put inside of the custom field. So to do that, we want to come over and we will take a look at our custom.php. I'm just going to open this up in the code editor so that I can look at it for reference. And we're going to grab these field IDs, Facebook URL, Twitter URL, and LinkedIn URL. And we're going to pop them in custom attributes. So we'll start off here with our Facebook link, and we're going to do meta, search for meta, because I want to display meta value For the post ID of the current post, that's going to be the current post for each one of these icons. And the key is going to be the ID. So we'll start off with Facebook URL. Boom. We'll do the next one for Twitter URL. And then the last one for LinkedIn URL. Oh, look, I had a typo there. Nice. And looking at it, I'm realizing that we're replacing the content, not the links. Let's just come back up. And I'm going to select all three of these so that we can modify them all at the same time. You can see right here, WordPress actions for Anchor plus 2 more. And we're just going to change that replace content to replace href attribute. And that's also going to escape out the URL. So now when we save this and export our theme, we'll see what we get. There we go. Now we are updating to facebook.com Jane, twitter.com Jane, LinkedIn Jane, Facebook Jimmy, Twitter Jimmy, LinkedIn Jimmy, Facebook Liz, Twitter Liz, LinkedIn Liz. But our hover text and our accessibility text has not been changed yet. And that's because we haven't done the expression thing like we did in the last one. So let's do that right now as well. Now, the way we're doing this is going to be a little bit different because we're doing it inside of a query, not inside of a block where we can modify each item individually. I know I said in the beginning of the video that we weren't using any code, but I guess I lied to you because we're going to be using just a little bit. And it's not going to be complicated, and I'm going to show you exactly how we do it. So I'm going to start by selecting all of my link wrappers. And we see we're already using the meta value for the URL inside the href value. But now I'm going to come down and I'm going to use a function WordPress action. So there it is. And now you'll see this created 2 functions. One of them is the function that we're going to apply for our attributes. And then this other function is going to basically pass through what we're doing here into the link itself. So we're going to come over and we'll set this to attribute, and we'll set the attribute to title. And now for our function, we've got one that's already built into the system that displays the current year. We're not using that. We're going to do some custom code, and I'm going to paste this in. All this is doing is just an echo that's going to echo the word follow. And then the dot here concatenates strings. We're calling this function that says get the title. And what this function does is it's going to return the title of the post that has the card. And we're going to concatenate some more strings. And then after that, we're going to write on Facebook. So we're applying this to all 3. And then I'm just going to come in and I'm going to modify each one to say the correct social media name. Twitter, LinkedIn. Save this, export, refresh. And there we go. Follow Jane Dewey on Facebook. Follow Jane Dewey on Twitter. Follow her on LinkedIn. Jimmy Cheatham on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And then I'll do the same thing for our accessibility text. And with all 3 of these selected, I'm going to choose function. I'm going to leave content as set this time because I'm not changing the attribute. We're going to change the text inside the span. And for the function, we'll do custom code and we'll pop that in. Change Twitter to say Twitter and LinkedIn to say LinkedIn. And now let's look at the inspector for one of these. And there it is right there. Follow Elizabeth Howe on Facebook. Follow her on Twitter. Great. And so now each of these cards is completely dynamic, and we can add a new one just by creating a new employee here. I'm going to make myself a senior partner. I'm going to make myself look like this young man. Write an excerpt. Give myself a Facebook. I'm not going to do Twitter and LinkedIn this time. We're going to publish it and view post. And now we'll come back to our page. And there I am. I am Adam Lowe, senior partner. I am the greatest. And it looks like we need to do 2 more things. So number 1 is I need to add the conditions for our social media links. Then the second thing we need to do is add logic to order these properly. So right now it's still showing as Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe because this is the order that I entered them in. But if I had entered them in a different order, it would not look this way. So let's go ahead and make those last few changes, and we will call this done. So for my employees, we're just going to make sure that we're changing the order here. We'll start with Jane Dewey. She's going to be order of 0. Jimmy Cheatham is order of 1. Elizabeth Howe, order of 2. Adam Lowe, order of 3. You know what? I want to make myself 0. We'll do 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now I'm first. Then we have Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And then lastly, we're going to put the code in to make these all conditional. So we'll start with Facebook, and we're going to do our icon wrapper. And we'll scroll down here to our list of conditionals, and we'll use if get post meta. So now this is going to say only show this element for this post ID as something inside the key. So if we're doing Facebook, we're going to do a Facebook URL as the key, Twitter URL, and LinkedIn URL. And there we are. Now we've got the conditions in place, and you saw when I refreshed, I lost my Twitter and my LinkedIn because I don't have those defined. I only have a Facebook link defined. There we go. So now we have everything in our card. Now, the last thing I want to do here is just open up our plugin directory one more time, because we can take this whole directory zip it up, and distribute this wherever we want. This can go on any of your clients' websites. The only thing that Pinegrow says in their license is not to sell blocks that are created using their tool. But this is a great way to create a custom block that shows exactly what you want to show, gives your customers just the fields that they need to edit, and it keeps you from having to rely on third-party tools and add-ons and things that are going to be constantly upgrading and breaking. All the code inside of the plugin is completely clean. You can open it up inside of Visual Studio or Notepad or whatever, make any changes that you want and save it back. So this is all basically the same thing that you would do as if you were hand coding a plugin or a block. There's nothing fancy going on under the hood, except for the fact that Pinegrow takes a lot of that repetitive work and puts a wrapper around it to make life really, really easy. Even if for some reason Pinegrow ever stopped working or you decided that you never wanted to use it again, you can still use these blocks. You can still make changes to them just by going straight here in the code. You can still modify them, update them, whatever have you. So you are not beholden to Pinegrow at all. And that's one of the beauties of this tool. I know that was a lot to take in, but we covered a lot of ground on this video. Remember, we touched on some pretty advanced stuff here, and you don't have to go crazy like I did. Even just creating a simple block with 1 or 2 places where users can modify text or photos is a great first step in the right direction. If you have any questions at all, you can feel free to reach out to me. Just leave a comment on this video, or you can find me at peakperformancedigital.com.